Hi, and welcome to another edition of Whiteboard Wednesday. Today we're going to look at the GDPR and clinical trials. Let's say we're a Boston-based biotech running a clinical trial in France with 20 participants, and interestingly, the company doesn't have an EU subsidiary. So, what's the first thing they need to do? They need to look at whether they need to complete a data protection impact assessment or not, also known as a DPIA. So why do they need to complete a DPIA? Well, thankfully the European Data Protection Supervisor recently came out with some really good guidance on whether you need to complete an impact assessment or not. They get 9 criteria, and if you tick 2 of the 9 boxes, then you need to complete the impact assessment. From what's especially relevant from a clinical trial is that criteria 4 discusses highly sensitive data, which is medical data. Criteria 5 looks at large-scale processing and permanence of processing. Large scale can either be a lot of data about a lot of people or a lot of data about a single person. So even though there's only 20 participants in this trial, there's a lot of data being collected by each participant, so it would be considered large scale. And by its nature, by the nature of clinical trials, the data, the processing is permanent. What's involved in this? The clinical trial sponsor is the person who's responsible for completing the DPIA. In data privacy parlance, they would be considered the controller. The other people involved would be the investigational site or CRO, the cooperating CRO, and the principal investigator. Again, in data privacy parlance, these people would be considered processors or sub-processors. Other items that come up for conversation when you start getting into the impact assessment are the legal basis for processing, which always creates a good conversation. Informed consent is something that is very prevalent in, very important in the clinical trial world, but not so relevant when it comes to data privacy. And then joint controllers. This can become a bit touchy because a lot of these guys will consider themselves to be processors, where in fact they might actually be joint controllers, and the impact assessment usually fleshes this out and indicates good solutions when it comes to this. So what's involved, who's involved? First of all, we consult the existing CTR documentation, which you'll have a lot of, and it provides the basis for the impact assessment. There's a number of calls with the sub-processors, these 3 outlined, discussed here. And we work closely with the data privacy officer within the sponsor. If they don't have it, if it's outsourced, that's fine as well. But essentially, they would be the key contact within the sponsor. And once we identify, as part of the impact assessment, it will identify a number of data privacy risks. Once those risks are identified, we mitigate against them and we finalize the impact assessment. So all in all, they tend to take 2 to 3 weeks, depending on how responsive all of these people are. So once you've completed your impact assessment, the next bit you need to look at is whether you need an EU rep or not. This company, because they don't have a legal entity in the EU, which is covered here, they are processing personal data, which, because it's medical data, there can be no doubt about that. And the processing is not occasional. So occasional is a concept that exists in data privacy, and because by its nature clinical trial data is permanent, it can't be considered occasional. So 2 big things you need is if you're doing a clinical trial in Europe, you need to complete your impact assessment before you start your clinical trial, and you need your EU rep or your Article 27 rep. Hope you found that helpful and useful, and look forward to seeing you at next week's Whiteboard Wednesday. Thanks.